They didn't understand your value. That's why they overlooked you. That's why they underestimated you. That's why they took you for granted. That's why they assumed you'd always be there. Because in their mind, you became familiar. And familiarity has a strange way of making people forget what they have. Think about that. The people who see you every day don't always see you clearly. Sometimes they stop noticing your consistency, your loyalty, your character, your generosity, your effort. And it's not because those things disappeared, but because they became expected. And expected things often become unappreciated. Maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you were the one everyone called when they needed help. The one everyone leaned on. The one who showed up. The one who remembered birthdays. The one who checked in. The one who stayed late. The one who sacrificed. The one who carried more than anyone realized. And over time, people stopped seeing those things as gifts. They started seeing them as obligations, as if that's just who you are, as if you'll always do it, as if you don't get tired, as if you don't have needs too. And that's one of the hardest experiences a person can have, to give so much that people stop noticing you're giving at all. And honestly, that doesn't just happen in relationships. It happens in families, friendships, workplaces, schools, churches, communities. And anywhere people become accustomed to your presence. Because here's something I've learned. People often notice your absence long before they appreciated your presence. And it's not because your value suddenly increased. Because your absence exposed what your presence had been providing all along. That's different. And if we're being honest, there were seasons where you kept trying harder. Maybe you believed that if you gave more, they'd finally see you. If you worked harder, they'd appreciate you. If you loved better, they'd value you. If you proved yourself one more time, they'd finally recognize what had been there all along. But here's what they never expected. What if your value was never waiting for their recognition? Think about that. What if their inability to see your worth was never evidence that it didn't exist? That's a completely different conversation, because value doesn't begin the moment someone notices it. Gold doesn't become valuable because someone discovers it. It was valuable before anyone picked it up. A masterpiece doesn't become meaningful because someone finally hangs it on a wall. No, its value existed before it was recognized. The recognition didn't create the value, it simply revealed it. And maybe the same is true for you. See, their opinion was never your identity. Their blindness was never your deficiency. Sometimes people overlook extraordinary things because they become ordinary to them. And it's not because they are actually ordinary, it's because they're familiar. Eventually, you stopped asking, why don't they see my value? And you started asking, why have I been allowing someone else's opinions to determine how I see myself? That's the question that changes everything, because now you're no longer performing for validation. You're living from conviction. You're no longer chasing appreciation. You're appreciating yourself. You're no longer waiting for permission to believe in your worth. You're finally recognizing what has been true all along. And one of the things I always say is this: your value doesn't rise and fall with someone else's ability to recognize it. And whether you understand that philosophically, spiritually, psychologically, or simply through your own life experiences, the principle remains the same. Recognition and value are not the same thing. That's one of the biggest reasons I do what I do. I help people reinterpret their past so that they can reclaim their future. Because maybe what happened didn't mean you weren't valuable. Maybe it meant you were looking for confirmation from people who had never learned how to recognize value in the first place. And those are two completely different stories. And the story you believe becomes the life that you create. And that's exactly why I wrote Phoenix, From Stability to Power. Because there comes a point where every person has to stop asking, how do I convince them to value me? And start asking, how do I fully recognize my own value, whether they ever do or not? That's what Phoenix is about. It's about learning to trust yourself, learning to stop outsourcing your worth, learning that confidence isn't pretending that you're valuable. It's remembering that you always were. They didn't understand your value. They overlooked your consistency. Yes, they underestimated your character. They took your presence for granted. They assumed that you'd always be there. They never expected you to stop looking for them for confirmation. They never expected you to recognize your own worth, because the moment you did, their opinion lost its power. And you see, the real victory wasn't finally getting them to see your value. The real victory was you never needed their eyesight to know what you were worth. Peace, blessings, love, and power.